The desert stretched infinitely, an expanse of golden sands under a crimson sky. By day, it baked beneath the relentless sun; by night, it pulsed with an unnatural glow, as if the earth held a secret just below its surface. Here, in this forbidding wilderness, the legend of Zakara was whispered, a tale of prophecy, rebellion, and unyielding hope. Zakara was no ordinary child. Born on the night of the dual eclipses, when the suns and moons aligned in perfect symmetry, her arrival was heralded by an ominous storm that swept through the desert. The elders of the village of Nka spoke in hushed tones about the prophecy. It was said that a child born under such skies would be chosen by the eternal flame, a divine force that had been dormant for centuries. Many doubted the stories, dismissing them as remnants of an old world superstition. But when Zakara opened her eyes for the first time, they glowed faintly, as if lit by an inner fire, silencing even the staunchest skeptics. The village itself was no stranger to hardship. Situated at the edge of the harrowing wastes, its people lived at the mercy of the desert's mood swings. Water was scarce, crops withered under the relentless heat, and the nomadic raiders who roamed the sands added a constant threat of violence. Yet, Nka endured. Its people were resilient, drawing strength from their traditions and their faith in the eternal flame, a faith that had waned over generations but had not been entirely extinguished. Zakara grew up hearing these stories, particularly from her grandmother, Isha, a woman of sharp wit and an unshakable belief in the old ways. Isha often spoke of the flame as if it were alive, describing it as a force that chose its vessel not for power but for purpose. Zakara would sit by the fire, mesmerized, as her grandmother's voice wove tales of heroes who had been touched by the flame, wielding its power to shape the world. Yet Zakara felt none of the divine purpose her grandmother spoke of. By the time she turned 16, she was known more for her defiant spirit than any supposed destiny. Her fiery temper matched her piercing amber eyes, which often made people uneasy. Some whispered behind her back, calling her cursed. Others simply avoided her. Even Zakara began to doubt her grandmother's tales. If she was chosen, why did she feel so ordinary, so powerless? That changed the night the dreams began. It started subtly, a flicker of light in the corner of her vision as she slept. But each night, the visions grew more vivid. She saw a towering flame, its edges shifting like liquid gold. It called to her inner voice that was neither male nor female, neither kind nor cruel. Zakara, it whispered, you must awaken. The sands stir, and the world waits. At first, she dismissed the dreams as mere figments of an overactive imagination. But as the nights passed, the flame's voice grew insistent. It spoke of an ancient threat buried beneath the sands, of a kingdom lost to time, and of a power that would either save or destroy the world. And always, the voice ended with the same chilling words, the choice is yours. One night, after waking from the dream drenched in sweat, Zakara stumbled outside her family's small hut. The air was cool, and the desert stars twinkled like scattered diamonds. Yet something felt different. The world seemed alive. The sands shimmered faintly under the moonlight, as if imbued with a strange energy. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath her feet. A low hum filled the air, and Zakara felt a warmth spreading through her chest, as though a fire had ignited within her. She fell to her knees, clutching her chest, as the hum grew into a deafening roar. Then, as quickly as it began, the noise ceased. The desert was silent once more. Zakara looked up and gasped. Before her, etched into the sand, was a symbol she had never seen but instinctively recognized, a flame encircled by two intertwining serpents. It glowed faintly, pulsing with the same rhythm as her heartbeat. From that moment, Zakara knew her life would never be the same. The flame had chosen her, and whether she was ready or not, the sands had begun to stir. The symbol etched in the sand pulsed faintly, as though alive, its glow matching the rhythm of Zakara's racing heart. She stared at it, the soft hum of its energy still resonating in her ears. The desert had never seemed so vast and yet so focused, as if all its secrets had converged on this one moment. Zakara reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing the edges of the glowing mark. The sand was warm, almost hot, beneath her touch, yet it didn't burn. Instead, a rush of energy surged through her body, igniting every nerve with a searing clarity. Her vision blurred, and for a moment, the world disappeared, replaced by an overwhelming void filled with light. In the brightness, she saw flashes of images, cities swallowed by shifting sands, warriors wielding fire as a weapon, and a towering figure cloaked in shadow, its eyes burning with malice. The visions came too fast, too vivid, each one leaving a scar in her mind. Then, a voice pierced through the chaos, deep and resonant. "Zakara," it called, calm yet commanding. "You have been chosen. The flame burns within you now. Seek the forgotten path, for the sands shall soon bleed, and the world will need its light." The light dimmed, and Zakara found herself kneeling in the sand once more. The symbol had vanished, leaving no trace of its existence. The desert was still, the stars above serene and indifferent to what had just transpired. But Zakara was different. She could feel it. Her chest burned, not painfully, but with a heat that seemed to pulse outward, radiating through her limbs. Her fingers trembled as she stood, the weight of the voice's message pressing on her. "The forgotten path," she murmured. "What does that even mean?" She glanced around, half expecting some divine sign to point her in the right direction, but the desert offered no answers. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Zakara made her way back to the village. Her footsteps were heavy, her mind racing with questions. What had she seen? Who was the figure in the visions? And why had the flame chosen her, a restless, rebellious girl who had never fit into the mold of her people's expectations? By the time she reached the edge of Nkar, the village was beginning to stir. Smoke curled from the cooking fires, and the sound of voices drifted through the air as families prepared for another grueling day. Zakara hesitated, lingering in the shadows of the dunes. Her chest still pulsed with the unfamiliar warmth, and she wondered if the others would see her differently now. Would they notice the change? Would they fear her? As she approached her grandmother's hut, the familiar scent of herbs and spices welcomed her. Isha sat by the fire, her frail hands busy grinding leaves into a fine powder. She glanced up as Zakara entered, her sharp eyes narrowing. "You're up early," she said, her voice tinged with suspicion. Zakara hesitated, unsure how to explain what had happened. Finally, she blurted out, "Something happened in the desert last night." Isha set down the mortar and pestle, her expression suddenly grave. "The dreams," she said softly. "They've begun, haven't they?" Zakara nodded. But it wasn't just a dream this time. There was a mark in the sand, a flame surrounded by serpents. It glowed, and then, her voice faltered as she struggled to find the words. "I felt something. Inside me." Isha's eyes widened, and for the first time in Zakara's life, she saw fear in her grandmother's gaze. "The mark of the flame," Isha whispered. "It is real. The old stories, they spoke of this." Zakara leaned closer. "What does it mean? What am I supposed to do?" Isha reached out, placing a hand on Zakara's arm. "It means the flame has awakened in you. And if the stories are true, the world is on the brink of great change. You must be ready, Zakara. The path ahead will not be easy." Zakara stared at her grandmother, the weight of her words sinking in. The visions, the voice, the mark, it all pointed to something much larger than herself. But ready or not, the flame had chosen her. And deep down, Zakara knew there was no turning back. The morning sun cast a pale golden light over Zakara as Zakara stepped outside her grandmother's hut, her mind swirling with questions. The village was coming alive with the rhythm of daily life. Farmers prepared their tools for the meager crops that stubbornly clung to life in the arid soil, while traders arranged their wares on dusty cloths. Despite the air of normalcy, Zakara felt detached from it all. Something had shifted inside her, something she could neither explain nor control. She kept her grandmother's warnings close to her chest as she walked through the village. The flame had awakened in her, this much was clear, but the prophecy and its implications loomed like an ominous cloud. What would the others think if they knew? Would they see her as a savior or a curse? As she approached the central square, a familiar voice called out. "Zakara. Finally dragging yourself out of bed, are you?" It was Aaron, her childhood friend and one of the few people in the village who didn't treat her with suspicion. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with an easy grin that masked a sharp mind. He leaned casually against a post, his dark hair catching the light. Zakara forced a smile. "You know me, Aaron. I live to disappoint expectations." He laughed, falling into step beside her as they walked toward the water well.